Today we're talking with Cat Coode of Binary Tattoo about social media safety.
Thank you for joining us today. If you like what you see, please do hit the subscribe button and the like button. It helps more than you know. If you love this, please tell a friend, find us on Facebook, or back our efforts on Patreon. Thank you again. Now let's get after it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome again to Safest Family on the Block, where knowledge is power. With us today is Cat Coode. Hello, Cat.
Hello.
Welcome. Now,
Thank you.
Cat Coode is the founder of Binary Tattoo, with a mission to help safeguard your data and protect your digital identity, backed by 2 decades of experience in mobile development and software architecture, as well as a certification in data privacy law. Cat helps individuals and corporations better understand cybersecurity and data privacy. She specializes in privacy regulation compliance and delivering privacy education seminars. Cat is an engineer, speaker, consultant, author, and above all else, a parent. Her motivation to help others was born out of her concern for her kids and our ever-changing digital landscape. Cat, I've been, as I said before we started recording, I've been stalking you on your YouTube channel for a while now, and thank you so much for bringing this stuff to the attention of the general public. And I'm really excited to have you on the show. And for folks to get to know who you are, really, I'd love for you to just tell us what binary tattoo means. It's clever and almost a pun.
It is a pun. So
being a dad, I like dad jokes. I like puns. So
I do have a real binary tattoo. I do.
Ooh.
And yeah, so I did refer to myself for a little while as the girl with the binary tattoo, and then people, it's not a dragon, it's just binary. But nonetheless, but binary is the language of everything digital. And so anything you're using, including your Nest thermometer, is transferred in binary, and tattoo for the permanence of what we're putting online. When I started this business, it was very much based around kids and parents. And when I go to talk to kids and I say, why don't any of you guys have a tattoo? And they all say, because it's permanent, right? It's permanent, and they're not old enough to make those kinds of decisions to go get something permanent. And we joke about the fact that you can have them removed, but it's very expensive and very painful. So it's the same thing with the internet, everything online. And I think we're seeing that now more and more, where things are coming back from 7 years ago. Yeah. But yeah, everything online is permanent, and we should really be thinking about it the way we would think about getting a tattoo is what am I putting out there in the world, and am I okay with this in 20 years?
Yeah, I feel like as a culture, we're in a really weird space right now where people are still very judgmental about other people's quirks, and everything's public all the time.
Yeah.
Where maybe 30 years from now, we'll reach a point of mutually assured destruction where if I run for office, my opponent won't mention those photos of me playing beer pong when I was 17 because he knows I'll bring up that he used to listen to ABBA on purpose. But until that shining day, I think we need to remind especially our teenagers about what they say and do online is going to bite them when they look for jobs, if they run for office, when they date. All of those things moving forward.
Yeah, and you don't meet anyone who hasn't looked someone up before they met them in real life. Like, everyone's doing that. There was a guy I had to look up once. He was a real estate agent, and I used to help people find their online profiles that were public so that they could clean them up, especially teenagers who are heading off to universities and colleges, because they're losing scholarships and all sorts of things for stuff that's online that they may not realize is out there. So I had looked this guy up, and he's a prominent real estate agent and in his early 30s. And I found a picture of him on Facebook where he was in his early 20s at the Playboy Mansion. It's not a good photo. So, I mean, I had to dig a little to get it, but if I could do that, other people can do it, right? There's so many free tools online now to dig up old stuff. So it's kind of important that people actually know what's out there.
Now, are there places that a rank amateur like myself and other parents who aren't techies could go for that first look at what's out there? Is there a good engine other than Google to take a look at?
Well, it's funny you should say that. Like, I always recommend using multiple engines. So Google is extremely curated. Like, what I find on Google will be different than what my kids find for the same search, would be different than what my husband finds, right? Like, Google shows you what they think you want to see. So I always refer to it as like, Google's your good friend. And Google's the one you're like, hey, what should I have for lunch? And Google's like, I don't know, you really like tuna, have tuna, right? Google knows you. Whereas there's others, Bing, which people don't love, I know, or DuckDuckGo that doesn't track you. So DuckDuckGo is the equivalent of when people, and I'm not trying to shame people, but when you go to a restaurant and you say, what's good to the waiter, and the waiter's like, I don't know what you like that's the equivalent of DuckDuckGo saying, what should I have for lunch? But at the same time, if I say to Google, show me my name, it's going to be like, oh, here's your own website, and here's your own LinkedIn profile. Here's all the stuff I know you've posted that you care about because you're always on these websites. Where DuckDuckGo might be like, oh, here's 6 articles your name is in that you may not have realized were on the internet. So the very simple thing to do is to open Bing and open Signal's another browser and open DuckDuckGo, especially because it doesn't track. So it's not using any information that way. And then look up your name, look them up everywhere and see what comes up. And then from a Google perspective back there, there's a Google alert. So if you just type that into Google Alert, it'll take you there. And then you should at least have your name, your children's names. If you own a company, you should have that in there. And then you'll get a daily email that essentially says, here's where your name has popped up. And it's quite effective. So it is like if I'm interviewed, like if you post this online and you say we spoke to Cat Coode, then the Cat Coode filter should pick that up and show me that that has been posted. So sometimes I get referred to in articles I didn't even know what I was in, but there it is. So at least you know what's out there.
As an author, I've found that as one of my first lines of defense against plagiarism and copyright violation too. Excellent.
Yeah.
And so it seems like for our kid, as parents, when we're thinking about privacy issues, sometimes we're thinking about careers, we're thinking about the security of our financial data, about identity theft. And those are real concerns for our kids as well, but there's also just the fact that they're beginning their lives and the information that they're putting out there. They don't even have the cognitive development yet to understand permanence and consequences in a very real way. What are some of the biggest risks that our teens and our tweens might face when using the internet, especially social media?
Yeah, okay, so the biggest issue that's a real concern is stolen credit. And you're talking about what the teens and tweens can do, but it also comes back to parents. And as parents, we like to share it, which is where we share our children and their lives. And a big thing I see on Facebook is happy 8th birthday to my wonderful son, John William Smith, who was born on this day 8 years ago at 8 pounds, 7 ounces. The amount of information required to apply for credit in someone's name is often just their first, middle, last name and their birthday. And so if you're sharing this kind of information about your children, because it usually comes from the parents and not the kids, then that is enough for someone to apply for credit potentially in your child's name. And you won't even know until they're 17, 18, 19, 20, and they go to apply for a credit card, and the credit card company comes back and says, no, your credit is because you've clearly borrowed $30,000 you never paid back on this credit card. So it's one of those very sneaky crimes because it goes unnoticed for so long, and by the time we figure it out, it's too late. So I'm always very worried about the sharing of birth dates. So I'm in Canada. We had a big breach with Life Labs, which is a medical lab. And one of my kids had broken an arm, and people are like, oh, it's not private data. I'm like, but the birthday's in there, right? You've got name, birth date, and address in there, and that to me is a risk. So so that's one of the things to start off with as parents that we need to be wary of. The big thing with social media, and especially as we've gone into pandemic mode and people aren't seeing each other in real life, social media has become really key for kids to connect socially. And now we have to balance this safety security thing with, I don't know how else to get my kids to connect with their friends. We don't have the landline and the party chat line that we used to have. Everyone got on the party line. So picking social media isn't always our choice. So sometimes you'll have a kid who's like, all their friends are on Snapchat, and then that's the platform of choice for that group of friends. Or all of them are on Instagram, and that's the platform of choice. There there is an age minimum on all of these social networks. It is 13, and that is by law. The Children's Online Privacy Protection Act is a law that indicates that companies cannot take information for kids under 13. If they're taking it between 13 and 18, it has to be aggregated or anonymized. And then over 18 years old, you can do whatever the heck you want with it. And so very much when kids are joining these things, they're like, yeah, I'm 12. I'll just say I'm 40. Like, so that's a problem. So the first thing is, if your child is under 13 and wants to join a network and you're okay with it, and they want to join because that's where their friends are right now, ensuring that their age is as close to 13 as possible. And kids sometimes don't get, I mean, you come from safety security background. Some kids don't always sometimes get the safety issue. Like the whole, like a stranger might come to, and they don't get that. But they don't like their information shared with people they don't want it shared with. So telling them that if they come in as over 18, that someone could come and take their photo or their likeness and share it on another website in Japan, that freaks them out. So that kind of, you know, if you claim you're over 18, you're going to have all this data shared. That often has them coming back and setting their date closer to 13. And then if they are between 13 and 18, or again, you have allowed them on their privacy settings and privacy settings, your kids should really only be connected to people they know in real life. And they should be able to tell you who all of those connections are on that network.
Okay, wow. That's a lot of information. Note to self. Stop posting my kid's birthday where everybody can see it.
On Twitter,
Yeah.
on Facebook Public, yeah.
So you had mentioned about how by law they're not supposed to be on there if they're under 13. How does that interact with that newish Facebook Messenger for Kids function?
Gateway drug. It's totally a gateway drug, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, so there's a number of issues here. Part of it is parents were saying, well, I'd like my kid to be on Facebook because I'm on Facebook, but they can't because they're under 13, and Facebook's like, great, we'll just make a tool. They're not supposed to be using that data. They're not supposed to be processing that data, and they're not supposed to be selling it. But there was research that was coming out where people from either within Facebook who had left, or people who got the inside information, that were saying the Facebook staff were still able to access that information. So I love Facebook as a platform. It's allowed me to connect with people I haven't seen in 20 years, right? I think it has a lot of value, but from a privacy aspect, I do not trust them more farther than I can throw them. But yeah, the idea was to put kids on there when they're young, and then when they turn 13, they're already in the system and they already have all their data, and then Facebook is allowed to use it. So people understand with all of these systems, this under 13 thing isn't to protect the kids. The reason why Facebook, Google, Instagram doesn't want under 13s on there is because they can't make money off of them. And if they can't make money off of them, what are they doing there? There's no return on investment for them. So that's when Facebook finally said, but wait a minute. So Google has done Google for School. Google for School is locked down from a privacy perspective because none of that data it's all anonymized. So there's no linking from your child to any of the data. They're just trying to understand what kids are using. Like, everyone uses PowerPoint and people love this feature, and that's fine. But again, gateway drug, because as soon as my children are old enough to make decisions about what they want to use, the decision is Google, because they've been using Google Docs for so long, that's what they're going to use. So just, I guess having that, I'm not trying to be cynical, but having that attitude of this isn't for me, this is for them, right? Facebook Messenger is really a tool for them. Is it of value to me because it's the only way my kids can communicate with their friends or other adults? Okay, but this is their tool, it's not a favor for me, right? It's the same thing as Google. Google gives us all the searches we want, but we're also giving them the payment of our data. So it's a tool for them to gather information on me. Is that a worthwhile trade-off for me to get what I want out of that service?
Yeah, businesses do not give a loss leader promotion as a favor to the public. And that sounds like exactly what this is. First one's free, kids.
Yeah, pretty much.
Now, you're mentioning Facebook, and I think a lot of parents are fairly familiar with Facebook, although maybe not some of the perils of Facebook. What are some of the other social media platforms that teenagers are using these days? You mentioned Snapchat and Instagram. TikTok's in the news right now.
TikTok's huge. So TikTok was Musical.ly, and Musical.ly was actually a neat little app, which was similar to TikTok, where you could use clips and then like dub the clips with your mouth so that you look like you were singing, and yeah, you'd see kids in hallways going, and you'd wonder what they were doing, and it was Musical.ly. So Musical.ly was an American-owned company. They were under COPPA, and then China came and bought them and put it into TikTok, which was their own app. There is a national security issue. There is an element of we have laws and they don't. And China does not have the information collection laws that we have in North America. And so they in that country, they are privy to any information anyone shares at any time. And so TikTok very much is collecting all sorts of extraneous data about you. It's collecting data about where you go and what you say and what you do, and it could have microphones on. So I'm the first to admit it. It's a very fun app. I get it. I get why everyone loves it. But downloading it onto your device is really opening up like a microphone. Like I tell people, if you're wearing a little brooch that has a camera on it and a microphone and tracks you wherever you go, and you know it's all going back to China and you don't really care, then go ahead. Wear the brooch. Like TikTok is tracking. Like all the devices are tracking. All the apps have different levels of tracking, but TikTok really is tracking, and from a North American perspective, it's difficult to close that down. So India, as an example, banned TikTok and several other Chinese apps, including WeChat, which is also incredibly popular. So India banned them as a whole country. The debate right now is if an American company takes over TikTok, can it stay in North America or will it be banned is debatable. But then there's also arguments, are people just doing that because they're trying to make a political statement, or it's their legit concerns about the privacy. So, but TikTok is a privacy concern. It is collecting more information than it needs to, and it had ways in, this was the more concerning thing. It's not even that it had the information, it had ways for hackers to get that information and use it. So if I could get into a kid's account and see who they were connected to within TikTok, then I could potentially fire off emails to those kids from the other kid. So it appeared to be from the other kid, right? So like if Sally and Billy are friends, then I can send Billy an email that goes, hey, it's Sally. Can you just click on this link for a minute and see this video I made? And then now all of a sudden Billy's infected his computer with some kind of virus. And so that's called social engineering, where you use information about someone to gain their trust and in order to put malicious software on their devices or whatever it is. So TikTok has information that hackers can leverage to do that. And so it's just a repository of personal information that quite concerns me.
So I was going to ask about what parents can do to make it safer, but it sounds like in the case of TikTok particularly, go back to Nancy Reagan and just say no. To the degree that works.
Pretty much, and that's a hard sell. Like parents have asked, and it's not the answer they want, right? So people be like, "What about TikTok?" And I'm like, honestly, I wouldn't put it on any devices. And a lot of them are like, "Yeah, my kid likes it too much," or "It's fun," or "It's the only way." Especially with teenagers, it's like it's the only way we connect. Otherwise, I have no common ground with my kid right now. I'm like, so that's your choice. All of this is a choice. I think that's really right. Everything on the internet is a choice. It's just, is this choice worth the cost? Am I okay with sharing this data or not? Whereas Snapchat and Instagram have privacy, have the ability to actually close down information a little bit better. Those companies taking your data, for sure. But they're taking it, and we know where it's going, at least.
Well, let's talk about Snapchat, because I know that one's a concern because of the impermanence of the discussions, and my understanding is that it's a kind of a favored one of adults who might mean ill to kids because the messages go away. Could you address Snapchat? What are the risks and what can we do about them?
So there were rules put in place a long time ago from like the FBI, from the authorities, CIA, whatever. They put in rules that all of the social networks actually have to maintain their stuff. And sometimes that's a great way to get kids not to do it in a bad way. So I always kind of say, look, if you're sending a photo to someone and you're okay with some rando in California looking at that photo just to double check it, hey, go ahead and send it. But if you don't like that idea, then you may not want to send that photo. But they do have now software that looks, especially for nudity, they're looking for kids in distress. So they have algorithms that basically comb the photos to see how much proportional skin there is in the photo. And if there's a lot of skin, then they will often put human eyes on it to say, is this person okay? Like, what are they doing? But having kids understand that people are looking for the photos for this purpose will discourage a lot of teens from sending those photos. And so that mitigates on that side. But the authorities do keep the photos. Like, the photos are kept by Snapchat, and they are being looked at by Snapchat for that reason. From a just general protection reason, the kids screenshot stuff, they all do. There is a little thing that pops up that says, this has been screenshotted. But there are apps you can buy that overwrite that screenshot it in a way where you don't get the notification. Or you just get your buddy with a phone to come over and you're like, I'm going to show you the snap, take a picture of it, right? So there is no impermanence here at all.
Okay. So there's an illusion of impermanence, but really it's wide open.
Everything online should be considered permanent and potentially public at all times. Sure, my own kid had an experience where they sent a text and then someone else screenshotted the text and then accidentally sent the text. So it wasn't damning. It was just like, I didn't intend that for anyone else. And that was a very easy lesson to learn, right? So you don't want it at an older age when it wasn't that lesson, when it was like, oh my God, I sent this photo and it was me nude and now this person's shared it. And I think as parents, we all want to pretend these kids don't do that. I've had a few texts from friends, especially when there were lockdowns in our city and no one could see anyone, where I've had texts for friends with 17, 18-year-old kids going, look, I know my child is not supposed to be sexting, but what app should they be using if they were to do that? Not Snapchat is the answer, or Instagram for that matter. So yeah, there is no impermanence. And I think it's just the understanding of that. It's a great way to not keep things. I mean, the whole intention of Snapchat was, if you've ever seen teens text, it's like, here's my cat. Oh, look at my cat. Look at my cat again. Oh my God, now their tongue is out. It was really just, I don't want 17 pictures of your cat on my device. And frankly, you probably don't want 17 pictures of your cat on your device. It was like hey, here's a super fun way of sharing photos and we don't have to keep the stupid photos. That was the intention. And then people started using it for other things. So it can still be used that way.
Okay. So you brought up something that I was debating whether or not to ask, and I think I'll go ahead, about our teenagers sending nude photos, which we wish they weren't, the same way our parents wish we weren't fooling around in the back of a car, but we know they are, the same way our parents know that we were fooling around in the back of a car. Technically, that is child pornography. And I've heard varying levels, I ask 100 people, I get 100 different answers as to how seriously the authorities take that and whether they're willing to press charges. What do you know about that?
Okay, so everywhere has a different legislation, and this is the massive problem. So you really need to check the law where you live. In Canada right now, it can be as young as 12, and if it is consensually sent, it is not considered child pornography. So a 12-year-old could send a semi-nude photo to another 12-year-old. That is not technically considered child pornography. We don't tell kids this. Do not advertise that. And again, it depends on where you live. Your legislation might be different. When it becomes a legal problem in all places is distribution. The distribution of child pornography is always illegal. So if you have received a consensually agreed upon photo from someone, and then you show it to someone, you resend it, you repost it, that's illegal. Now, typically, if the other person is not allowed to have your photo if you have taken the consent away. So as crazy as it sounds, and sometimes when you drop legalese, it freaks people out, right? So if you know that your teen has sent a photo to a now ex-partner, you could have them send a message that said, look, I sent you this photo 6 months ago when we were dating. I no longer consent to you having that photo. because I've withdrawn consent, legally, you are now possession in child pornography because you have a photo that I no longer consent to you having. So I suggest you delete it from all things, and if I find out that you still have it, I'm pressing charges. That you can do. So there isn't any, well, I'm sorry, I was dating them, well, I was dumb, I wasn't thinking. Nope, you revoke consent, you take that away, they now have something they're not supposed to have. Yeah, it is a fast and furious world with distribution, unfortunately, right? Once it's out there, and the best thing, obviously, we can do is prevent kids from sending them at all. I miss the bleacher days. I always joke, you went behind the bleacher and you lifted up your shirt and walked away and there was no evidence. And that was lovely. Like, where's that? We don't have that anymore. But no, it's like you said, it was in the backs of cars and places and nobody had any recordings of it. So children are sadly trying to live the same life teenagers have lived for thousands of millions of years, and we just have it all recorded now. So the less you can record, the better. And the understanding too that a video is also, even if you're live streaming like we are right now, I mean, you're recording this, I know that, but there's nothing stopping you from screenshotting any moment of this video. So sometimes people get a false sense of security with FaceTime or right, that they're, oh, I'm just on a video or Skype, and no, that can all be screenshotted. The number one advice always from police is to pull devices out of bedrooms. So you don't have to see their screen. You don't have to like, you can give them privacy that way where they're on their laptop or their device and you can't see the screen. But if you can see them, you know that they're in clothes. That makes a big difference. And one of the big tips I have for that is right when your kids are super young, first device, no bedrooms, no bathrooms. Because if that's been the rule forever, then that's just the rule. And you're not telling your 16-year-old who's had their iPad in their bedroom for who knows how long, or their laptop or whatever they happen to have, oh, hey, by the way, you can no longer do that. No, it's the rule, right? So my kids always, no matter what, have been no bedrooms, no bathrooms. And then now it will always just be the rule.
So keep that genie in the bottle from their very first iPhone at the beginning. Is a little bit like, I remember in the 90s, the advice was to keep the family computer, back when there was a family computer, in a public area and not in an office. So you just walk by and the kids, when they were online, would be observed. So it's kind of an application of that to now that we have 100 screens in every house. And
yeah. I mean, there's a million factors, like doctors will tell you kids don't sleep at night because the fear of missing out. And so they're checking their devices at 2 a.m. And I guarantee you one of their friends will be on at 2 a.m. That's the problem. Kids who game, those games never end. So they could always pop on at 3 a.m. and someone will be playing somewhere. Like, it's just, the internet world never ends. So if we don't pull devices out of those rooms while we're still control of these kids, if we don't pull the devices out of their rooms and let them sleep and rest their brains, there's no reason to get off of them. There's always something happening.
That's very interesting. And you had mentioned social engineering as a trick that hackers use earlier. And this feels like kind of a defensive social engineering tactic. What are some other IRL tactics we can use to keep our kids safe?
Well, actually, it's interesting that you say this. So I always say out of the bedroom, like I'm currently in my office. You're currently in a curated office. Like, I assume you know exactly what books I can see behind you. But kids often stream from bedrooms. And if we're and especially in a virtual school mode, people are streaming all sorts of stuff in the background. You've got, anytime, again, you go on TikTok, you get kids streaming out of bedrooms, and there's like a certificate from their school, and then there's like their soccer trophy. Like, you are just giving away way too much info in the background of videos. If you have a YouTube channel, whatever, and anytime you're recording, you want to make sure that background is free of anything I could use against you to get to you. So in real life, I mean, again, in real life, we give away actually a lot of information. Like, I always joke that, when my kids were little and I had like the baby car seat and the toddler car seat, and I don't have, some people have those stickers on the back of their car. I'm like, in real life, I have little kids, approximately how old they are. If you saw my car, like, we actually give away a ton of information in real life. I wear a wedding ring. Like there's just things we've kind of forgotten about. You can tell approximately how old I am. There's so much physical information we give out all the time in real life that giving out information online isn't always the worst thing, right? That's the perspective. It's like if I'm on this video now, people can make those same assumptions about me. So, yeah, so it's not always the end of the world, but you don't want to give away any more information than you need to for the context of what you're doing. And especially I'll see kids who have these great lockdown Instagram profiles. So the only thing you can see is their bio. Can't see any of their pictures. Awesome. And then in their bio, it says, find me on this other network at, and then there's their Snap handle, their TikTok, like, and it just it defeats the purpose. So yeah, pulling all that personal stuff out of the public eye.
Excellent. So let's get back to Snapchat a little bit about there are privacy settings that we should insist upon. What are those for Snapchat?
So the two biggest ones are location. Snap Maps, when it was released a few years ago, by default was marking everyone on maps. And, you know, in the media, it became a funny joke because everyone's got a Bitmoji avatar for Snapchat. If you've never seen Snapchat, you make an avatar that looks like you. And so people were opening up these maps and finding their like boyfriends at another girl's house or something. Like it was just this big joke it was like 10 people who found their boyfriends cheating on them using Snap Maps. But from a kid's perspective, it was always a risk. So Snap Maps is now off by default. So when you download Snapchat for the first time, you have to turn it on. So that's good. That's a good thing. But there's also a recommend me to friends. So I have Snapchat and literally only connected to my own kid, just for fun. And it's important too for parents. You and I just talked about this, but you can't make the assumption that because you're on a network with your kid, you know what they're doing on that network. Can't. But you should be on networks just to understand how they work. And, you know, we know more than our kids all the time. So having the ability to say, hey, tell me about this new feature. I don't get it. Like, what's a story? How does a story work? Show it to me. Kids love knowing more than we do. So being on that app and being like, hey, how does this work? What is this discovery mode? How do I get a cool filter? Come show me how this app works. They love that. But the other one is this ability to be discovered by friends. Like I was saying, I'm only attached to my kid. Every time I open Snapchat, I get a list of 30 names of people that I might want to follow on Snapchat. And a lot of them are friends with my kid because that's where it's getting the names from. Geographically, Snapchat knows where I am. It's not advertising it to other people, but it does know where I am. So it's also giving me people in the area. But I know that it kills me as a parent because I'm like, oh, that's so-and-so's daughter and that's so-and-so's son and that's the neighbor up the street. So, I mean, everyone makes their own rules as parents. My rule is that I am my daughter's advocate and that's number one. So I'll ask her first and I'll say, you know, can I tell so-and-so's mom that I can see their name? And she's like, nope, not your problem. I'll be like, okay, then I'm staying out of it because I don't want to be the cause of your mom told my mom and now I can't use this app. So I don't want to be that's just because I know, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, but I get all those names all the time, all those recommendations for all these kids. And I'm like, and a lot of them use names that are their names. So it'll be like Jane Smith. And I'm like, I know who Jane Smith is. And that's her full name. So there's nothing hidden there. So yeah, so you should be hiding that so that at least on Snapchat, when you give someone your handle, when you're like, hey, I'm at Cat Coode, someone can find you. But if they type in Cat Coode, then I shouldn't pop up.
Okay. Wow. And is there anything else that parents should know about Snapchat? Anything that we haven't covered?
Well, as you alluded to, everything disappears, right? And again, we know that it's not permanent, but so the duality of, as a parent, I can't check up on my kid, right? Like a lot of parents, and it really depends on your relationship with your child. I had a conversation with a dad whose daughter had ADHD and she didn't have the executive functioning, right? So she often posted things without thinking. She would often share private information and think later. And he's like, as her parent, I can't let her use apps that I can't remove. Like everything, I have to know what she's doing at all times. And so I'm like, well, then Snapchat's going to be a problem for you, right? Snapchat, it's out there, it's been seen, it disappears. So from the negative part of that, if you have a kid that you feel needs to be monitored, you can't monitor that. But on the positive, the non-permanence allows them to have those inane chats and like giggles and, oh my God, did you see that? That was so cute. And then it disappears and they don't have to worry about that. So having kids understand that it could be permanent, and then having parents understand that they can't check. So I know that sounds opposite. It's a weird dichotomy. On one hand, I'm saying you can't watch your kids because it's not permanent. On the other hand, I'm tell your kids it's permanent. It's not permanent to us. It's permanent to Snapchat and whoever might want to capture it.
Okay. Wow. Now, I had a question, and my train of thought just derailed momentarily. But let's go ahead and move on to Instagram, because that's the other big one with the kids now. Same questions. What are the big security concerns? What are the things we can do about it?
So Instagram has a direct messaging feature that a lot of kids use as their primary messaging. So parents need to understand that. That's one of those. I follow my kid on Instagram and I'm like, yeah, but you can't see their messages if you follow them. So you don't know what's going on there. A single email account can operate multiple accounts. So that's where you'll hear these Finstagram, and which is a fake Instagram account. Kids are prolific. They are very good at this. They know how to take pictures and post them so if you're like, oh, my kid doesn't have a fake Instagram account because they're currently posting 50 pictures a day. And I'm like, you'd be surprised what they're capable of. They're good. But they will sometimes have it in a well-balanced way where you could have an Instagram account that's like, okay, you know what? This is the Instagram account with my soccer games and I share this with my soccer team and I only put people from my soccer team that I know on this one. And then this is the one with my school friends. And then this is the public one where I bake cakes and I take pictures of my cakes. So there is a really positive use of these multiple accounts. Like there's a positive aspect of I'm going to control my privacy the way I want to, and I'm going to set these accounts up in ways where I share the right level of public information with the right audience. That's great. But what I see far, far too often are public accounts because kids really want, they want a certain person to see it. And I'm just going to stereotype, but man, have I seen way too many pictures of teenage girls in bikinis, way too many. And I will often get parents go, how do I get my kid to stop publicly posting pictures of themselves in a bikini? And it's usually parents in their 40s. So I'm like, you know what? Do you have a male friend that your daughter doesn't know that well that might come over at some point? And I'm like, next time they come over, just have them comment on the photo. This has worked multiple times where the friend will come and go, oh, I really liked your green bikini picture. It's just... No 16-year-old girl wants their father or mother's creepy friend to comment on their bikini photo. And that will often bring the photos down or close the accounts. So, I've been a 16-year-old girl, right? You're like, I really like that cute guy in biology. Maybe he'll see this photo if I post it. Because if you have a public account, someone doesn't have to be following you to see the photo, right? So, maybe he'll see my cute photo. I'm just going to stick it up on Instagram. You're not thinking about, forget your parents' nice friend who's just helping them out. The weird world of creepy people that are looking at your photo. And I always say when I talk to high schoolers, I'm like, do you really want a 40-year-old woman looking at your photos? Because I'm looking at your photos. Does that freak you out? Because it should freak you out. I'm seeing them. So kids should be closing them, especially younger kids, to only people they know in real life. Every parent's different. I can't tell parents how to parent because we know every kid's different, every relationship's different. Some kids have to be monitored closely. Some are not going to break the rules no matter what you do. So if you have a kid that has to be monitored or you're worried about, it is worth sitting down with them and saying, I need to look through your followers and you have to tell me that, how do you know this person and how do you know this person? So this is the story that I tell people because this really happens. I can geographically place 100 kids from a high school and then I can send out follow requests to 100 of them. So 40 of them don't care because they're just looking for followers, so they accept it. And the other 60 are like, I don't know this person, I'm not going to allow it. Fine. I wait a while. Then I'd go and resend the request to those 60 that never answered. And they open it and they're like, oh, I don't know this person, but she's connected to 40 other people I know. So maybe I do know her and I just don't recognize the account name. Especially if my name is weird, right? Like if it's Princess Clouds 344, people are like, I don't know who that is. Oh, maybe I do know who it is because clearly everyone else is connected with Princess Cloud. So that's how people who are trying to get into closed networks get into closed networks. So you'll often hear, oh, yeah, that's my friend's brother. Or it's my friend's brother's friend. I met him once when he was over at their house. And like, is it though? Like, do you actually know who this is in real life? So I always advocate that especially the younger the kids are, they shouldn't have anyone in that network that they don't actually know and have met in real life, because you have no idea who's on the other end of these accounts.
It seems like there's some ideas from security situational awareness where you're talking about environmental awareness, cultural awareness, situational awareness, and then third-party awareness is what they call bad guys looking at you.
Yeah.
And I think there's not enough information about that getting to our teens about the fact that this isn't really about your ex-boyfriend posting a picture of your boobs because he's mad at you one day. It's not even necessarily about somebody screwing up your student loans because they got your information, although those are both important.
Yeah.
Where for a lot of parents, the worst case scenario is that predator, is that bad guy who's getting into and creating a relationship. What are some of the things that we should be most aware of, most vigilant about to prevent that?
Ooh, okay, so awareness is the first thing, right? And I know there's resources out there now about child trafficking and all this stuff, and it's horrible. And as parents, we kind of want to shelter our kids from knowing that that's happening. And I don't need to tell you, because you come from the security side, that is the wrong answer. The right answer is to make them aware of the problem. If you don't tell a kid that a knife can cut them, then they'll cut themselves. So having them, and again, you got to know your kid and their level of anxiety. Are you going to freak them out more by telling them this, or how can you explain this? But yeah, there are largely that ploy I just explained is huge. The fact that people connect through other people. The other thing is always to be wary. So as human beings, we are on the side of kindness. And if somebody sees me on the street and they're like, hey, Kat, how are you doing? My first answer isn't to go, I don't know you. My answer is to go, hey, who's that? Who is that person? Right? We always kind of err on this, like, oh, I know you. So one example I always use was with a Facebook account when kids were on Facebook. They're not as much anymore. But this was a 16-year-old girl on Facebook. And she had everything locked down except for her profile photos, which are a sneaky way. You have to actually lock those down differently. So she had all her privacy settings set, but she had her profile photos were always public, because they are, and the comments on them were always public. And then I would notice it was always the same 6 girls that were commenting or liking her photo. And then there was one where her mom was like, look at my beautiful daughter. And I noticed she changed her hair a lot. I noticed she changed her nails a lot. She was one of those kids who liked fancy nails. So 5 minutes on her Facebook account would have enabled me to message her and say, hey, Lisa, my name is Jamie. We met at that party last summer at Brenda's house, which again, I got from a cover photo, right? Or other photo. Your mom had breast cancer. How's she doing? I remember she was sick last summer, and oh, you just cut your hair. Anyway, I'd love to meet you for coffee. You're really cute. So how about we meet at Starbucks across from your high school before your soccer practice next Tuesday? So that's 5 minutes of me digging into these accounts. Because her mom's account was public, so I knew about her mother's breast cancer. And her best friend had posted pictures from her party in the summer. I didn't even have to dig to get that. So having kids aware and understand that it is super easy to get information about you. So if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I know you from all these places, and you're not sure, you don't really know them, ask, I'm sorry, what party was that? When was that? Where was that? How do I know you? And go back to the friend. Like, I'm getting emails from this guy, Jamie, who says, I met him at your party. Do you remember this guy, Jamie? It's hard as a kid to put that kind of cynicism or skepticism in their head, right? But just giving them that example of, it's so easy for me to pretend to know you. So easy, especially when kids have uniforms on in pictures and, again, high school stuff in the backgrounds of their YouTube videos. So helping them understand that you trust the people you know, and if you don't know someone in real life, don't assume that they know you the way they know you or how that is. The other thing to keep in mind, though, that is tricky, especially with gaming, is we do now friend people in real life that we don't know outside. So I always use the example as if you're at a bus stop, you could talk to the stranger and say, hey, do you know what time the next bus is coming? That's in context of where you are without any private information. So if you're playing a game with people online, you could say, hey, do you want to team up and go get that villain? Or, hey, what are your specialties? We'll team. You can do that and still talk to people online without saying, by the way, here's my name, here's my parents' names, here's the school I go to, right? So it's not to say don't talk to strangers, because that doesn't hold anymore, especially in forums like Reddit and stuff like that, right? We can't say don't talk to strangers. What we can say is if you're talking to a stranger, talk to them in that context and don't give away your private information. And then that will help kind of avoid a lot of these social engineering things.
So healthy skepticism and cynicism.
Healthy, yes. Trust but verify is always the social engineering is trust but verify.
Outstanding. Now, are there any other, that trick you mentioned earlier about, so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of shotgun a bunch of requests and then circle back later armed with the people who went ahead and give this idea of being more familiar and closer to you than I am. Are there some other really common techniques that we should be aware of and make sure, especially our older teens who, they're going to be spending less time with us, we're not going to be supervising them as closely, and they're also going to be a little older, a little smarter, a little more capable of watching out for themselves, hopefully. What are some other things we should educate our kids about?
I mean, the big thing is that the people online, the catfishing thing, right? And there's whole TV shows and movies dedicated to catfishing. But catfishing is real and catfishing has happened. I myself is not a fan of 90 Day Fiancé, but I keep hearing stories about 90 Day Fiancé where they meet them and they meet them online and then they show up and they look nothing like they do in real life. So that wariness of when you're taking your relationship from being online to being in real life, these kids are using Tinder. And kids under 18 are using Tinder even though they're not supposed to be, right? So kids are using Tinder, and if you're not familiar with it, it geographically hooks you up with people in the vicinity, and you can swipe on them to say you want to meet them or not meet them. Always meeting people in a public, safe place. And kids are sometimes a better judge of character than you think. I remember I was in a swim thing. I was 16, and there was a guy who was 21, and he was in my same swim instructor's course, and he offered to give me a ride home. And this guy was shorter than I was, and he was just the sweetest little nothing guy. And I got home, and my older brothers looked at me, and they're like, "Who drove you home?" And I'm like, "Oh, just this guy." "How old is he?" I'm like, 21. And they freaked out. They freaked out because a 21-year-old drove me home. And now, as an adult, I look back and I'm like, still would have gotten in that car with that guy. I had good judgment, right? Even at 16, I had good judgment. So there's that fine line when you say to a kid, don't do that. They're going to assume they know better. So again, if you're going to meet someone in real, if they're on Tinder or they're meeting people, 18, 19-year-olds are still teens, and a lot of them still live at home, right? If these kids are meeting people on Tinder, meet somewhere public, meet somewhere where there are other people and you can turn around and get out of there if you need to. If you're not bringing a car, have someone pick you up so that you don't have to walk out of there and have them follow you. You don't know who you're really meeting in real life. It is not who they say they are often.
And a small detail that struck home that I should have thought of before, because I have a son in his 20s. You're saying that people who are under the age of legal consent are using Tinder and lying about their age.
Yeah.
And that's another thing to talk to some of your older kids about.
That's a very valid, that's not on the internet side. There's always, I always try and separate the tool from the problem. And to me, that's not an internet problem. That's a 16-year-old dressing up like she is 19 and going out somewhere to a bar and saying, hey, I'm 19 years old. That's a real problem that happens too. But yes, your son could totally be on Tinder and meeting 17-year-old girls that look and girls look old now too, right? They, in a good, beautiful way, but they look older than they are. So I think that's the thing. So Tinder used to come right off of Facebook, but people again were lying about their Facebook age. So the ages on Tinder never matched the actual age of the kid. It's hard to tell.
And there's the joke about the person who claims to be 28, 32 and walks in and is clearly 60. But the other side's a risk as well, especially for our kids.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
You have no idea who you're meeting with.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked about a couple of specific social media platforms, and I want to mention to our viewers that you have a wonderful series of very specific videos on your own channel about, okay, parents, this is what you need to know about Facebook. This is what you need to know about Instagram, so that our viewers can go take a look at those. And on that topic, Kat, could you tell us a little bit about what you do and what are you really excited about right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started my company, I was very much focused on parents and kids. And as a parent, I will always be focused on parents and kids. But it's not just a parent problem. Like I do data privacy seminars and consulting for companies, because often new companies are taking data they don't realize they're taking. They're not even doing it on purpose, right? They're designing a cool product and they don't appreciate the data that they're taking. But my own website, which is binarytattoo.com, I have articles on monitoring your kid, turning off your location, turning off your microphone. And then, like you said, on my YouTube channel, I hired a teenager to make those videos because I wasn't using them like a teenager does. Like, we have to acknowledge as adults that even if I have Snapchat, I'm never going to use it the way my kids use it. Yeah, there's a video on Tinder if you're curious how it works, and certainly Snapchat and Instagram explaining some of the perils that kids may not consider. Also on my website, I have a network and app resource that lists a lot of these apps, and it starts with, here's what appeals to the kids, because as parents sometimes we're like, that's stupid. Why are you watching this YouTuber for hours? That's dumb. Not for us to judge, because it's their entertainment, right? So here's the appeal. This is why they like it. And then and the risks that parents need to know about for those individual things. So yeah, so the bulk of what I'm doing really now is data privacy for both individuals and companies, but really helping companies understand to limit the collection of this private data and do well by the person, do right by them. And then from the individual perspective, being aware of the cost that we're giving away data. Is it worth it? Is the service you get in exchange for that data worth what you're giving away? And being just really cognizant, really aware every time you download something of that trade-off.
Okay. I'll be putting your URL and then your YouTube channel in the show notes, so any viewers who want to find out more can follow that. And I went really deep before contacting you about this because the information was so deep and so good. Well, it seemed good to me. I don't know enough to know for sure, but you were confident and it was comprehensive. So, well, Kat, thank you for coming on today. Before we go up, I'd like to ask, as a parent, so I've got a 10-year-old who's we're talking about whether or not to put that phone on, and then I've got my son in his 20s, and then there's other parents watching who've got those teenagers and those tweens. If I were to take a weekend and get 3 or 4 or 5 things accomplished, where would you recommend that we start with kind of getting more secure and more safe with the internet and with our kids and with our families?
So for sure with those younger kids, I would suggest creating a contract. I have a free one you can download off my website. But anytime we enter in any agreement, you're renting a house, you're buying a car, whatever, you sign a contract that basically says, hey, if I destroy this house, here's the consequences. So one of the big purposes of that contract is to outline the rules, so there's no debate. And then the second part of that is the consequence of breaking those rules. And then there's no debate again. So if the rule in your house, and it's outlined in there in your contract, says, no devices after 9 or 10 or 11 or whatever it is, no devices in your bedroom or whatever the case your thing is, then there's like, if you do this, then you lose the device for a week. And just because I've been doing this for 7 years and I've talked to so many parents, I know the ones, again, the earlier you set up rules, the easier it is to enforce those rules. So parents who have from the get-go, and it's never too late to start, but right, parents from the get-go with a 10-year-old who are like, here's the time, here's the end time, and that's the consequence if you don't have your device plugged into wherever it needs to be plugged into by this hour. You can set up monitoring. I always tell my kids, like, I can set this up, but I hate having to set that up. Like, I'd rather you be responsible and not spend more than X number of hours on YouTube. Like, that's what I'd rather do. the truth in my house is my kids get lost on YouTube. So I did have to set a 1 hour limit, but electronically, because they just lost track of time. But establishing those guidelines and saying, look, here's what I expect of you. You're a great person. I expect that great person to be reflected online. I expect you not to bully. I expect you to get off your device at this time. I expect you not to do these things. And if you do, these are the consequences, because I own the device. Like, I don't care if your kid's paid for it. As most states and provinces, according to the law, if you own the cell contract up till they're 18, you own it. So it's still your device, right? Even if they own it. And then flip on that contract, I always say your obligations as the parent. I agree to understand what you're doing, or try and understand what you're doing. I agree to give you X amount of space. I agree to either like not touch your device or touch it, whatever your family, like some parents have all the passwords, some don't. I agree to give you privacy. However, if I'm worried about this incident, you promise to show me this thing. Like, I agree to trust you, but at any time I can audit. Whatever works in your family is that agreement. And one of the most important things that I definitely want to say before we go is, statistically, they've shown over and over again that parents or kids don't tell parents things because they're worried about the loss of the use of their device. And so it's that whole thing when we were young. I don't care what happened at the party or how you got there, but you call me and I will come pick you up, right? Okay. Don't care what you saw on the website or YouTube or how you got, like, I care what I don't care that you got there. You come tell me you saw something that made you uncomfortable, and I will help you out of that. So if your kid has seen a YouTube video, which is so easy to fall on, that has made them uncomfortable, your kid was searching, especially developing children are searching body parts and they end up on porn, right? Your kid has ended up, or they tried to search porn and then it gave them nightmares. You find porn, you find something that scares you, you find someone that's bullying you, I'm not going to take your Instagram away. I'm not going to take your YouTube away. I want to know what you found. I want to help you through this problem, and then we'll figure out a way to get through this. So if it's someone bullying you, I'll help you block them. If it's, right, there was a girl in my town whose nude photo was shared on Instagram, and the first thing the parents did was take Instagram away. And Instagram was her primary communication with her support, which were her friends. And so what her parents accidentally did is took away all her peer support. What they meant to do was take away the problem. It didn't take away the problem. The photo was still being shared. So understanding that, like, if they're in fear of losing it, they will not tell you when they actually have problems on all those sites.
Well, I feel like that's really important. And the metaphor you used was exactly right about the mulligan was what my dad called it, right? Where if you're in trouble, I'm not even gonna tease you about it, but you need to feel like you can come to me for help. And if they're going to lose the phone, which is the center of so many kids' lives, that makes a lot of sense. I remember when my oldest son was 15 and I picked up his phone and he'd forgotten to close the browser after enjoying some pornography. His consequence was that to get his phone back, he had to ask me 10 intelligent questions about sex and relationships and porn. And it took him like an hour, but there it was. Right. And he asked some good questions. But that kind of thing about, we do have to have consequences, but they can't be so draconian that it just means the kid's going to get sneaky.
And often, as just a parenting tip that I've heard that I love, is the consequence needs to match the crime. So, your kid sneaks out of the house, taking their phone away that's not the consequence that matches the crime, right? Like, if they're using and abusing their device, if they're bullying someone on that device, if they're not putting it back when they said they are, then they lose the device. That makes sense. They're misusing the device, they lose the device. But they didn't do well on a test and they lose their phone. Like, again, every family's kind of different, but can you ground them and say you can only use your phone till 6 or whatever it is? But yeah, understanding that this is the fabric of their communication. This is not the way we used telephones back in the day. Like, this is really the fabric of their social lives. They have nothing without it, often.
And that's, what was the term from the 90s? Natural consequences. And then there's also the piece where, because it's so important to them, I think that it's really tempting to just go for it immediately. You know, go for the jugular when they've done something wrong, because you know it's something that they actually care about. But I think I'm hearing you say that that can be a huge mistake from a strategic level in terms of keeping open lines of communications, maintaining trust, and of course, having good communication and good trust can alleviate a whole lot of the risk that we've been talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Kat, thank you so much for coming on. You are a font of information, and I know you're a busy person with a lot of important things to do, and I really appreciate you taking your time with me and with our viewers today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Thanks for watching today. I hope you found something useful or at least entertaining. If you did love what you saw, there's a lot of ways that you can support us on Patreon, on Facebook, simply by liking or subscribing below, or by following the links you see right now to the other videos on our channel. Thank you again for everything you do to keep us moving.